And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have 1, 2, 3 good brothers. Ha 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 ha. We have our flamboyant flyer and living Wikipedia, good brother Flutter. We have the man who is completely innocent of any anal probing, good brother Nephenor, and the man in the red, the man in the not so cheap sunglasses, good brother Shades. I haven't used that one in a while.
I was gonna say.
We are back once again with one that was a little bit of a flash of inspiration moment. as these topics sometimes are. It is March 26th, making this the actually this will be the last one of the month of March. We are heading straight into April. And well, next Saturday I know that all of my coworkers are going to be afraid.
Considering the shit that you can pull off, yeah.
The best part is I don't have to do anything.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Sounds like these I wish I could pull off a Vincent Price laugh. Yeah, that is unfortunately what my coworkers believe I am like on April 1st.
Well, I mean, your history speaks for itself, Monk.
Yes.
I suppose the culmination of that is the whole thing with the Krispy Kremes.
Hey, those were not cream filled before you got them.
Neff, have I told you that story?
No, but I'm guessing.
So, after my little stunt where I messed with everyone's coffee, and got them so paranoid that I was banned from the coffee machine. Somebody brought in 2 boxes of Krispy Kreme, and I want to make clear I didn't bring the boxes. I didn't even know they were there until I came in that day. I see them. I think nothing of it. I go to my desk. I'm wrapping up for the day. I see those 2 boxes sitting there. Upon closer examination, the tape was still on the boxes. They hadn't been opened all day.
Oh.
So I turned to my coworker and I asked him, "We had 2 boxes of Krispy Kreme and nobody dipped into that?" And without missing a beat, he said, "I'm not touching that. You probably swiped it with a veggie platter or some shit." And that's when it dawned on me they thought I had brought the donuts and that it was some sort of trap.
Son of a bitch.
So like I said, I somehow managed to prank them without doing anything.
Right.
Goldra wins by doing absolutely nothing.
Uh-huh.
And that is how you win.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, isn't there some line about how the how if you want to get the most complicated job done, give it to the laziest person?
Strangely enough, it was Bill Gates who said something like that. He says, give it to the laziest person because they'll be the one who finds the most efficient way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. Now,
Anyway.
I have made clear over the years that I and I think most of us are fans of animation as a whole, the medium in and of itself. I don't do this east-west shit. Save if you want to do that, save that for NBA and NHL conferences.
East Side!
I was going to make a joke about Canadian provinces with it, but it seems to be just Toronto versus everybody.
Actually, it's Toronto and Quebec versus everybody.
That seems to be the rule. Everybody is united in their distaste for Quebec.
Indeed. But as far as sports goes, though, that doesn't mean shit to me. There's a reason I never show up on the Men Who Stare at Sports Ball.
Yeah. But the point is, the medium, the practice, and the history of animation is something we're all fond of in one form or another. And of course, I'd say for a lot of us, Pixar has been there in one form or another throughout that journey. Which is why it's a bit of a shame that in the last few years Pixar has, I won't say completely fallen off the wagon, but the wagon is rickety.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
I'd say most of the people in the wagon have died of dysentery.
That's what happens when you try to caulk the wagon and float it. But I figured this, and I'd always wanted to do a video on Pixar in one form or another, and I figured this would be a good way to do so as well as bring in that contrast that I love bringing up in these kind of videos. Thus, we have the title that you see in front of you, The Overshadowed Pioneer. And the big reason that we'll get into why we use that term, but let's consider the fact that one of the real big signs of Pixar's status as this pioneer is, well, for starters, having the first feature length CGI film to their name is one thing. The other is the fact that I remember this marathon of a bunch of Ghibli films coming on. I think this was on I want to say TMC back when I had that channel. And in between the films, you would have some commentary from one of the directors at Pixar. Just on the history of different films that they were showing. This is also my first introduction to Whisper of the Heart, which is, in my opinion, one of the more underrated Ghibli films, but that's getting on the rails.
Yeah.
But as time has gone on, it's starting to feel more and more like Pixar has become a name rather than something that you'd want to go out and see because of that name. I guess the best way for me to put it is a line I use when it comes to describing the rot of The Simpsons. Years ago, everybody was trying to copy The Simpsons. Now, The Simpsons is trying to copy everybody else.
And we're kind of seeing that now with Pixar.
But, and I will admit that they are just as much of a victim of the current, not just the current climate, but the current political climate within Walt Disney Studios.
I'm also seeing something else just in your picture alone there that kind of points out the difference. If you look at the two characters on the far right, they have the CalArts bean mouth.
There is certainly... Go ahead.
I believe May and
Luca both. Yeah, they definitely have that beat. Like, if you were to make it in 2D, May over there would absolutely look like something right out of CalArts.
Yeah.
And that, I think, might be part of it. They're probably hiring more people out of CalArts, which is reducing their quality.
Possibly.
I had thought about doing an episode on the pervasiveness of CalArts, but the only reason I didn't put that in the schedule is I began to realize it's not that simple. It'd be very easy to write off the bean mouth thing, and that's it. But I look at CalArts the way I look at, say, the Performance Center in Junior Land.
Yeah.
You know, this... I've talked with you about this, Shades, about my issues with this idea of having people come in and work quote unquote WWE style.
Yeah.
Despite basically having them trying to have them unlearn what they spent their whole career, all the stuff that they spent their whole career learning and developing into their own style. I think Brian Alvarez said it best when he said they're trying to make a bunch of Buddy Landells.
Oof.
Not exactly high bar to cross because Buddy Landell was a regional copycat of Ric Flair, but still.
Yeah.
But now I will note this. I know that there is an upcoming slate of films, Elemental, Elio, Inside Out 2, and some untitled and 3 untitled films in 2025 and 2026. We won't be covering those, but I will say Elemental does not look all that interesting. I feel like it's a been there, done that in terms of its broad concept. Elio can't say anything about, and Inside Out 2. Well, it's a sequel to something that I don't think needed a sequel. Not much else to dissect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But our story begins with, well, Toy Story, which I think I look at Toy Story as kind of setting groundwork for certain things that would be prevalent a lot in Pixar. That being the parent-child dynamic.
Yeah, that is a recurring pattern with a lot of their cast of characters.
Mm-hmm. Now it isn't as blatant as it will be later on, but you're starting to see the seeds with this. As far as why it took that long to get why it took till 95 to do a feature length CGI. I think it's because a lot of people looked at CGI as an accessory to film, not something to build around.
Yeah, up prior to Toy Story, the closest thing to a full CGI production we had seen not really had shown the true potential of the tech. Like, we had stuff like Beast Wars, which was really good, but the tech was, it had its issues.
The reason Beast Wars stands the test of time is because of writing.
Yes. Yeah. Graphic-wise, though, that the CG in that show was,
Oh yeah.
I know some people are going to give me shit for this, but I do think Reboot had better CGI for its time.
Yeah, but that's the key. It's for its time. Like, those are shows that, as far as, like, the visuals go, has not aged well.
Yeah.
Writing-wise, fan-fucking-tastic.
Oh. There's a reason why I'm putting it on a higher pedestal than, say, the New Adventures of Johnny Quest, which also tried to integrate CG.
Yeah, there's a reason nobody talks about that show these days.
Yeah.
It's everybody forgets that the Venture Brothers was originally supposed to be a parody of Johnny Quest. But of course, then 3 years later, you had A Bug's Life, which I maintained that somebody was watching Seven Samurai when they were coming up with A Bug's Life. I don't know if it was outright stated, but you look at the broad strokes and you can kind of see it. Especially since the whole fight is over food. Although I will say, A Bug's Life has a better ending. But that was one case that didn't really do the parent dynamic. It was just doing essentially a fairy tale.
Yeah.
But the thing with The Bug's Life also is, bear in mind that, unfortunately, DreamWorks, when it comes to insect stories, DreamWorks decided to pop up out of nowhere and beat them to the punch.
Oh yeah, with ants.
Mm-hmm.
Literally coming out, like, I'm looking at this. Bug's Life came out November of 1998. Ants came out literally a month prior to that in October.
Yeah, that was a case of unfortunate timing. Although I remember seeing some people try and compare the two films, but the only comparison that you can really make is superficial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but unfortunately, when those two movies were being promoted at roughly around the same time, you can only really go by the superficial. And unfortunately, I think the only reason The Bug's Life still is more fondly remembered is because it is Disney backed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Then a year later, we had Toy Story 2, which I'd say the big theme with that is in a roundabout way nostalgia.
Considering what some of the story involves, yeah.
Mhm. But and of course this was their attempt at actually trying to do a sequel. I know it's easy to pick um on sequels coming out of Disney, especially these days, but for every rule there are exceptions.
Yes.
And I will note when it came to what they did in 2001, Monsters Inc. That was them once again dipping into the parental dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say even more so than with the original Toy Story.
Yeah, because you literally had Mike and Sully trying to basically protect and parent over the young child.
Mm-hmm.
Over Boo, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Of course, 2 years later, we had Finding Nemo, which I would. I remember liking Finding Nemo, though it's once again digging into that whole parental figure thing.
Yeah, literally a father looking for his son.
But
That's
how
that's the plot.
there's that weird relationship with 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 Pixar and DreamWorks in terms of putting out similar things concurrently with each other.
Oh yeah,
You
Shark Tale.
Um, Finding Nemo is remembered for all the right reasons. Shark Tale is remembered for all the wrong reasons. The very, very wrong reasons.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And going back at, I remember having to rewatch that for a bit of research for something I was doing years ago. Anyone who tries to go that sort of uncanny valley again, I want them flogged.
Yeah, I think DreamWorks learned a harsh lesson on that one. That one got roasted over the coals.
Plus,
Oh,
I'd imagine that
absolutely.
bringing in all those celebrities couldn't have come cheap.
No.
Yeah, they did not do that. Getting Will Smith to lead your movie? Come on.
No, although once again, the world has the last laugh against Will Smith.
Yes.
This would be which is very appropriate given recent events.
Oh yeah.
Especially the fact that he was apparently planning to do a big comeback tour, but then Chris Rock's special came out and pretty much killed it.
Yeah.
Keep his name out of your mouth.
He kind of asked for that, didn't he?
Yeah, he kind of did. Anyway,
But then of course we had the Incredibles, which I still consider one of the magnum opus of this era that Pixar had.
oh,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Fun fact, that was actually an early date night for me and Lady K.
Wow.
And
Yeah, we saw that in theaters.
something
Incredibles.
something that I find interesting just looking at the notes that I have.
No, we watched that one at home while I was pregnant.
Someone's being corrected.
Yeah. I'm thinking it might have been with somebody else then that I had that date night, because I remember having a date night with somebody where I went to see The Incredibles. I know I saw that in theaters. I could have sworn it was Lady K.
But what I do find interesting with that one, and this is a rare case, especially considering their previous work, the director, story writer, and screenplay writer were all Brad Bird.
Mm-hmm. Which, hold on.
October 2004.
November. Sorry, guys.
Which isn't something they'd do again until the sequel.
Which is when you have somebody pulling. First off, having somebody pull double duty at that level is rare. Having them pull triple duty is even more rare.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always important to note that there is a vast difference between a story and a screenplay.
Yeah.
writing one and writing the other, they're barely even the same profession.
Hmm.
Now, in June 2006, we had Cars, which I will be honest, I did not like Cars.
I can understand why.
I get it was
Whatever
massively
click with me.
I get it was massively successful on the I think the issue that I had, for lack of a better term, is Cars felt more like a Disney movie than a Pixar movie.
Yeah, I kind of see that.
In terms of the story and comedy, yeah, I can see that.
The thing is that there was always a level of seriousness with Pixar movies. Like, you look at Toy Story, Bug's Life, Monsters, Inc., there's always some level of like realism. Not so much in terms of the look, but in terms of the feel. You know, Toy Story, of course, a child growing up and moving on from one toy to the next. Bug's Life, of course, as we talked about earlier, the whole protecting their home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Monsters, Inc., you know, protecting a child, the seriousness of that. Of course, Finding Nemo, looking for a lost son. But you look at Cars, it doesn't have that true, realistic, serious moment in it.
No, it really doesn't.
It's not relatable in terms of emotion on an emotional level.
No.
Its motif is somebody getting humbled and having to
Literally based
having
off
to-
the story of the grasshopper and the ants.
Point still stands, though.
I would say the motif with A Bug's Life is more of not so much in the sense of protecting one's home, but more of Flick trying to demonstrating that he can prove himself with his ingenuity and not just be a weirdo.
Fair enough. It's been a while since I've watched A Bug's Life, so I couldn't remember strictly. But the point still stands, though.
Yeah.
That there was always that relatability to it that Cars doesn't really have.
And I think a lot of people put up with it because the mindset was, okay, this is the studio film, so that they can make money to do the real stuff.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
look what came out literally almost a little over a year later.
Yeah, Ratatouille, which could definitely be seen as a return to form in that regard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One that is kind of dipping into similar matters as A Bug's Life, but not in the exact same way. Although
No.
I will note the food critic in that one is only a slight exaggeration of professional food critics that I've had the displeasure of meeting. You remember when those food critic reviews were read off in that episode of Hot Ones with Gordon Ramsay?
Oh yeah.
And Gordon's like, who pissed in his pot? It's like he's not wrong when he says that food critics are worse than TV critics.
Yeah.
I have met only like 2 different ones, and each time I would hear them talk, the shoulder devil was like, just deck him once and let's go home. I was seriously considering just hitting him, just because of how few things are going to trigger me like dealing with someone being smug.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But while it's not at the top of my list, Ratatouille I certainly enjoyed. I want to ask if I ever get the chance, I want to ask the writer of Food Wars if that was an influence.
I can totally see it. Yeah, this was probably like the biggest year for Pixar because you had the trifecta of just holy shit movies with
Yeah, the biggest like 3-year stretch.
Yeah.
I'd almost say 4 because you got Ratatouille,
Yeah.
you got WALL-E, you have Up, and then you have Toy Story 3, a movie that left many people in fucking waterfalls of tears.
Hi.
But Wall-E obviously was a big deal for me as somebody who loves science fiction. And as an aside, leave it up to Pixar to find a way to make a cockroach look cute.
Not an easy feat, folks.
No, it isn't.
And is apparently descended from the McClouds, because whenever you think the cockroach is dead, he just pops right back up like nothing happened.
It's not something that's simple to do.
Ugh.
But I would say if I was to nail down the motif that they were going with Wall-E, it was living versus survival.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
definitely would make no sense.
I mean, it's outright stated when the captain has that confrontation with the AI. I don't want to survive, I want to live. Because you look at the people on the thing, and it's a luxury yacht that ended up lasting longer than it was supposed to.
Mm.
To the point that many speculated what was in those shakes. Like,
It's
there
meant for
wasn't-
people!
Yeah. Like, we got some Soylent Green shit going on here.
And I'd say with Up, I guess the best way for me to put the motif is that Up was about reclaiming childhood to an extent.
Yeah, considering that that's a huge chunk of the story, given main character and all the flashbacks we get
Mm-hmm.
with his widow.
That obviously that is vastly simplifying the matters, and
Yes.
with Toy Story 3, it was a degree of 3 and 4 you can kind of put in as a concurrent theme of moving on.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 being moving on from a human perspective, and 4 being moving on from a character perspective, given how the latter of the two ends.
Mm-hmm. And of course, then we had Cars 2, which was
Oh, yes. The sequel that no Pixar fan worth their salt wants to talk about, or even acknowledge its existence.
Wait, there was a Cars too?
Exactly.
My point exactly.
I'm trying to remember if it was this one that tried to do a poor man's The Man from U.N.C.L.E., or if that was 3.
That might have been 3, but I'm not sure. I haven't seen either.
But of course, then in 2012 we had Brave, which Brave was not a bad film, but I would say this was the canary in the coal mine that, in hindsight, we didn't realize was gasping.
Yeah.
Because part of it has to do with the motif that Brave was going with, the whole rebellious kid trying to carve their own path instead of the one that the parent wants, which is quintessential Disney princess.
Oh, yes.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's the other elephant in the room, is that this is when Disney Animation Studios, the Walt Disney Animation Studios, started dabbling in Pixar, started putting their feet in Pixar's pool.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Because around this time, like, they'd already started dipping their toes in with Tangled, but this was the year where they really dove in with the trifecta that is Wreck-It Ralph, Big Hero 6, and in between that, a little movie that you might have heard of, I don't know, called Frozen.
Yeah, that stretch was very much starting to dabble into Pixar's wheelhouse.
As far as those go, I remember people legitimately thinking that Wreck-It Ralph was a Pixar piece, which I can understand why, because it does fit
Given
in
the
their
story?
motifs.
I was going to say that given the story, it very much fits their motifs.
It's also one of the rare cases where the whole twist villain idea actually has a point.
Yeah.
Actually has a reason to be there, especially when you're going through this from the perspective of somebody who's supposed to be the bad guy, and gave us the best rendition of Zangief.
You are a bad guy.
You're a bad
But
guy.
you are not
That
a
does
bad
mean you
guy.
are a bad guy.
There were so many memes. There were so many times that people would use that version of Zangief there was basically a positive Zangief meme that was going on for months. You have thick thighs, good for crushing opponent's head.
Like what?
That whole scene was a meme factory. Consider between that.
Oh
and
yeah, considering the cast of characters you had.
Yeah, or better yet, thanks, Satan. Which I'm sure the Christian community just loved that one.
Yeah.
I'm surprised I didn't hear more outrage on that.
I know, right? You'd think that would have been prime target.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there was some, but it was from the people who still think Pokemon is the devil, so everybody ignores them.
Yay.
I mean, those people are in the same boat as PETA, and nobody listens to them.
Exactly.
Nope, especially when you tell them especially when PETA tries to tell people in Massachusetts that they can't have Old Bay.
Good fucking luck with that.
Yeah, that's something that you should not do.
Yeah. But speaking of that whole thing of where the canary in the coal mine came around, the big reason I keep saying that is putting aside the Scottishness of Brave. A lot of it is beat for beat what you would see from the strong-willed princess you would see from the Disney canon, and that's really the problem that I had with Brave. The fact that
the best comparison you could think of is Mulan in that respect.
Actually not far off, except putting aside the fact that Mulan is going to win out on the soundtrack department, no matter how hard you try. I mean, it's not like people have made.
Jack Chan, when it comes to the Cantonese version of "Make a Man Out of You," come on.
I was going to bring up how it's not like some people have made a career out of it or anything.
Nah.
I'm not going that. I was going with Caleb.
Oh yeah.
Caleb Hiles, Jonathan Young. I mean, they both did covers of that song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that this is, technically speaking, this was new ground for Pixar, but it was not new ground for Disney as a whole. In fact, I'd say by 2012, the whole Disney princess cliches had been thoroughly mocked across media for years.
Yes. So much so that they'd even do that in a later film. Well,
yeah, they literally I think it was around this time that they had literally made the Disney princesses into an official brand in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think.
And of course the other problem was around this same time you had stuff like Enchanted and as well as Frozen, and actually I consider it which is the reason why I consider Frozen to be a bit overrated. Kind of poking fun at these cliches, as well as other animation projects outright roasting them. The big example that comes to mind is having a Disney parody character in Drawn Together, even though I hated that show.
Mm-hmm.
Or the numerous times that Robot Chicken made fun of the concept. Then again, Robot Chicken makes fun of everything, so low
Yeah.
bar. But of course, when it came to Big Hero 6 was just people in Disney expressing their weebery. Is the Because a lot of the motifs I saw with Big Hero 6 would not be out of place in a anime from the Showa era.
No, despite this being based off of a Marvel property, it very much has that kind of that like vibe.
I mean, they weren't even being subtle about it when their main character hero is a Japanese name. Like it's pronounced, it's spelled in a Japanese way, Hiro.
Yeah.
Like real subtle there, Disney. Real fucking subtle.
Uh-huh.
Yep. But of course, in 2013 we'd have Monsters University, which I'm gonna be honest was a giant meh.
I've heard. Yeah, that's one of the. That's sadly Pixar's first real case of unnecessary sequel, even though that's supposed to be a prequel. But because you couldn't really expand on the story.
They couldn't. That's why they did it as a prequel, because they really couldn't do anything after the main story.
Yeah.
Actually, there were plans to do a sequel. Pixar didn't want to. They tasked Circle 7 to try and do it, but when Pixar got purchased in 2006, Circle 7's version just got shit canned. And truth be told, I think part of the problem with doing a prequel is the fact that we don't really need the story of how Harry and Mike met.
Yeah. Well, Mike and Sully met.
Yeah, Mike and Sully. What the? Names get cross-wired eventually.
Yeah.
Now, Inside Out, I very much enjoyed.
As did I. That it was a very inventive concept.
And again, going back to that relatability factor that we've talked about.
Yeah, in this particular case, it was the parts of that individual person, wanting to do good, but having to fix the mistake that they had made.
Yeah.
Although I will admit I have a bit of a bias towards Angry in that particular production.
Oh, color me surprised.
He's voiced by Louis Black. How can I say no to that?
I was thinking that. Yeah, I was thinking that.
Which, if that's not perfect casting, I don't know what is.
Right?
Though when it came to The Good Dinosaur, if I'm gonna be honest, that was another meh. Largely because, for one, it felt like I feel like there should be some unwritten rule that Disney should never do anything dinosaur related.
Oh
Ever.
yeah, because they also did the dinosaur movie in 2000, and that was also a flop.
That was Ambien.
Ambien, my mistake.
No, I'm saying the.
Oh, he's saying that movie was like taking Ambien.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
The
mistake.
The problem was I'd say if you were to mention dinosaurs and animation, everybody's going to think of Land Before Time.
Yeah.
Franchise that got milked to death and back 50 times over.
It's sad. It's sad that there's a modern equivalent to that, but that's neither here nor there.
The point is, and you know how I said that Brave feels like more of a Disney thing than a Pixar thing? The same thing can be applied to The Good Dinosaur. it doesn't help that around this time, Burton was doing Big Friendly Giant.
Hmm.
Uh, but the big problem is the motif of the boy and his massive friend is something that's been done quite a bit.
Yeah. Iron Giant, anyone?
Yeah. Damn you! Great minds think alike there, Flutter. I was thinking the exact same thing.
The film you can't forget about every Thanksgiving.
Nope.
But
Anyway.
in 2016 we had Finding Dory, which as far as sequels go, I didn't mind as much.
Neither did I.
But it does skirt the line of I'm not a fan of taking the side character in a particular story and giving them their own thing.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily work out as a story
Well,
a lot of the time.
I've had some issues with some attempts at it.
Hmm.
I think the biggest problem when it comes to those things is that whenever they do this, they always take the comedy character and spin them off. Like
Yes.
they take the person who ends up stealing the show ends up being the comedic relief, and they work best when they have someone a straight man to bounce off of. And every time they do this, it fails because they don't have a straight man anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Dory worked because she had Marvin Narland to bounce off of as the straight man.
Mm-hmm.
Take that away, doesn't work as well. It gets annoying. It's like when they took Joey and tried to spin him off of Friends, or when they took Shelton out of when they tried to make a whole series about Shelton from The Big Bang Theory. You need someone to bounce off of. You need a straight man. And every time they do this, and it pisses me off that they keep trying because they've not fucking learned.
This is one case where I will at least give Toei credit in the fact that when they give the side character their own thing, it's usually just a V cinema.
Yeah, it's usually just a movie.
And it's rarely the comedic character. It's usually just the secondary main who's oftentimes more serious. So you can easily create a new comedic character to bounce off of them.
Like since we're marks for double, let's consider the V cinemas that Double had gotten. Axel and Eternal.
Well, not exactly the best examples, to be honest.
Not exactly the best examples. Axel at the very least is a nice little follow up.
Yeah, it still works in comparison because the focus was on Ryu, but they still had Akiko there to act as the comedic lead. But the story wasn't completely on her. She was just she was still there. She was just kind of there to guide the story and have those comedic moments. But she wasn't the centerpiece of the story. Ryu was.
Although one could argue she was there to be the longest setup for one of the greatest troll jobs you will ever see. But I will admit that it wasn't the best example to bring up Eternal because Eternal wasn't exactly necessary.
No.
No. I love Double to Death, but that doesn't mean I defend all of it.
Yeah, because otherwise you would have had to defend the trap.
Yeah.
Are we talking about the was it the liar app? No, it wasn't the liar app.
Yeah, it was the liar.
It was the Liar fun episode.
Actually, I thought that scene was fucking hilarious. What the fuck are you guys talking about? I'll defend that one.
Yeah. I will admit that there are two things that redeem it. One of them is Akiko breaking down because she's I don't know. I don't know if they ever
The
explained why she was-
existential crisis.
The existential crisis she has with seeing Philip cross-dress.
when she was cross-dressed too for some reason,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and double riding Axel.
So yeah, I'll defend that.
To the point that I remember one of the folks in TVN had to break the silent position to give his what the fuck reaction. But of course, if I had to use one of the biggest examples of this whole thing of taking the comic relief and trying to make them the leading man or woman, Jack Sparrow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Jack
He was
worked best
never
because
meant to. Yeah, he was never meant to be the main character of those movies. He was always meant to be the comedic relief, secondary. But then the second trilogy happened, and their hand was forced.
Yeah, it's a case of Jack Sparrow worked in Pirates of the Caribbean because he had Will Turner to play off of. You know, that's what made that dynamic between Jack and Will was what made that story work most of the time. You take Will away from that, and they had to because the story was he was no longer able to come home.
Given the events of At World's End.
And now all of a sudden everything's on Jack, and he has no straight man to play off of anymore.
They tried.
And now people.
They tried to have Barbarossa be the straight man, but that can't work either.
Barbarossa, yeah, no. Considering how serious he is of a character, and the fact that he was the original villain.
It's a case of Barbarossa. You need a straight man, not a serious character, just a straight man. There is a difference between the two.
Yes.
Oh. Now, when it came to Cars 3, you can pretty much copy paste everything I said about Cars 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Pretty much. This was about the time where when we say Brave was the canary in the coal mine, this is where the wagon started falling apart.
Especially since the motif that it tries to go with is getting overshadowed by the rookie. Except the problem is the old guard and new guard motif. We did that back with the original Toy Story.
Yeah. With Woody and Buzz.
Yeah. Plus, and again, this goes back to what I was saying about Walt Disney Animation Studios. This was following up against the 1-2 punch of Zootopia and Moana.
Yeah.
Which Moana was all right. Its biggest lasting legacy is "You're Welcome."
Oh yeah, Maui.
Which is funnier in hindsight, given some of the rumors I've been hearing about Dwayne in the aftermath of Shazam 2 flopping. But Zootopia, I'd say that has had a bigger impact, especially since on the other side of the ocean we were getting stuff like Brand New Animal.
Yeah.
Again, the timing of that is just glorious.
Oh, absolutely.
Now Coco, that one I didn't mind.
Yeah, Coco was an attempt to redirect the ship back on course.
Yeah. Admittedly, I will have a soft spot for the iconography of the Day of the Dead. But,
yeah.
But I feel like the problem, if there's a problem that I have with films like Coco and Moana, it's doubling down on it being a cultural presentation instead of being a character's story.
Yeah, that. As much as I like Coco and Moana, that is a glaring flaw of those two.
And even stuff I like The Princess and the Frog, is kind of guilty of this. In that particular film, although Princess and the Frog isn't guilty of this as much,
No.
because in its case the culture that it's presenting is just a backdrop for its story, that being a prince trying to avoid responsibilities and the consequences of that.
Yeah.
Because Dr. Facilier technically speaking, gave him everything he wanted. That's how deals with the devil work.
Yeah.
And I will not deny that Friends on the Other Side was a fucking earworm for me.
Yeah,
Oh.
it still is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it very much has held up.
Of course, in 2018 we'd get Incredibles 2, which isn't as good as the original, but I'd say held up fairly well. And I think one of the big reasons for it is, once again, Brad Bird was the first and last voice on everything.
Yeah. Although the whole thing with having its villain have powers involving strobe lighting wasn't the best idea.
Yeah, Japan kind of learned that lesson already.
Yep.
But I think the big reason why it was better but not quite is not having as strong of a villain. Now, granted, it's very hard to follow up on somebody like Syndrome.
Oh, definitely.
And going from that to going to what's essentially as harsh as this is going to sound, a poor man's Starro.
Oh God.
and if I'm bringing in something like Starro the Conqueror, you know things are in dire straits.
Uh-huh.
But it seemed that the motif they were trying to go for is the attempt at balancing family life with rebuilding trust in superheroes.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why that didn't quite fit is just because it's not as easy to connect to that kind of motif.
Yeah, it was also a case of probably trying to do two different things at once, run the risk of spinning plates. We're actually starting to see a better version of the rebuilding trust thing in the current season of Hero Aka.
Yeah. Or at least we're seeing the breaking of it before the rebuilding of. Whereas with I think if they had instead focused on the idea of Mr. Incredible bringing his family back into the superhero game, and focused solely on that may have made for a better story, especially with the younger generation getting into this superhero biz, because the generational gap is something that Pixar has dipped into over the years.
It has, yes.
But doing that and doing the whole trust in superheroes thing, one of these is going to be an audience is going to be able to easily connect with than the other.
Mm-hmm.
And Toy Story 4, which we got in 2019, if that ends up, I know that there is talk of trying to do another Toy Story, though given how many things get announced and then nothing comes of it from Disney over the last 10 years, you'll forgive my skepticism.
Yes.
But most of what it very much does feel like a proper ending. I know
Mhm.
some would say 3 feels like an ending. 4 felt 3 is an in-universe ending, whereas 4 felt like um a final chapter.
Yeah.
Uh, of course, in March of 2020 we had Onward, which I feel like Onward would have worked would have worked may have worked a little bit better if it was done during the coming of age road trip kind of thing that we saw in the 80s.
Yeah.
Uh, I know it was born from from a personal place, but but that doesn't matter when I'm watching the work itself.
Hmm.
And from I think for me the reason why Onward didn't work with me was because of the fact that it didn't really I guess it didn't really establish its world. It I'm not saying I need detailed world building, but when you're introducing magic, there are questions you have to answer.
Oh, that there are.
Especially because when you introduce magic into a story, you can use that to do just about anything and everything. Because of that, you need to set limits. If you don't set limits, then you're going to end up with the issue of being able to bullshit your way out of everything, and thus making
Yeah.
all the threats all that less perilous. That doesn't happen with Onward, but there was a whole lot of ass pulling that I kept getting the vibe of. Now, when it comes to Soul, I did like Soul except for one thing. The visual style of the character design did not sit with me.
Yeah, I can very much see why.
Uh, and one would think I would love Soul because of my love for jazz. But you know how I said that Coco feels like it's more about the culture that it's presenting than its actual story.
Soul also falls into that too.
To a certain extent, yeah. Uh, is of course. Then when it comes to the whole afterlife stuff that they try to pull, um, it clashes. That's the best way for me to put it.
Yeah.
Now I will put a bit of an asterisk when it comes to Onward and Soul because they both came out in 2020 when everybody was acting like a fucking idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nobody was putting out any good movies around that time.
No.
Luca, I will admit that despite this being a very questionable era and despite my issues with Bean Mouth, I didn't mind Luca. In fact, largely because it felt like a coming of age story that actually dealt with consequences.
I think the bigger issue around this time was that because, and again, I am the one that keeps bringing up Walt Disney Animation Studios, because Walt Disney Animation Studios was really starting to get the bigger push. Pixar kind of just felt left to the wayside at this point. Like, they were kind of marketing these movies, but not nearly as much as what was going on with
No.
DAS, because you've got, even stuff like Raya and the Last Dragon was getting more of a push than Luca was.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they're still riding the high off Frozen 2, which had come out a couple years prior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Turning Red, I got some things to say about that.
Here we go. Drop it,
Actually,
folks.
going back slightly, I did notice something interesting in that around the time of, which was it? Yeah, it was Onward, I think. No, it was Soul, actually. Is before it was, when they put the promo stuff up, it was Disney Pixar. But with Soul and Luca, they had Disney Pixar, and then they had another Disney down at the bottom. So they were actually pushing the Disney angle a hell of a lot more with those ones. And they started doing that a lot more.
Anyway.
Now, with Turning Red, if you were to look at the trailers for it, you would think it would be doing a coming of age story that is using the panda transformation as a puberty allegory, which is something that Disney dipped into, if anybody remembers 13th Year, way back in the day. But the big problem that I have with it is, I'm just gonna come out and say it. Mei Mei is a Mary Sue. Is a Mary Sue, and another case of some of the writers within that company really hating the concept of childhood innocence. Especially if you were to contrast the coming of age motif and how it's used in that versus, say, a Goofy movie, which itself is dealing with the conflict of a child entering into adolescence and the relationship with their parent. Which is why they end up making good contrast in this regard. Although I think you know which one of the two is winning out in that fight.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But the big problem is up until the change happens. There's not really a whole lot of flaws. I mean, she's a model student. She has a very active social life, and she seems to be in a good relationship with her parents, especially her mother. Then the change happens, which first off the whole this particular change is part of a blessing our family has had for generations. Ends up creating more problems, because if that was really the case, why didn't you warn her about it?
Yeah.
There was also the whole thing with the drawings that she had made, and every time the fact that May's parents, every time May gets in trouble for something, her mother ends up blaming other people for dragging her into this. Which,
when
to be fair,
she doesn't address the whole thing with what May does.
Now, to be fair, I think we've all met parents who are like that, who will blame everybody else but their perfect little angel, even when their perfect little angel is a complete shit. But that doesn't apply here.
Mm-mm.
When it comes to the drawings she was doing, which I'm not going to get into the implications of that. What kind of person decides to bring that kind of thing up with the people at a supermarket, and dragging her along with it, and basically publicly humiliating her? Like, what the fuck was that? And doing panda rides when she was able to somewhat control the power, which, if it's supposed to be this poor man's version of a Hulk, you sure got over that quick.
Yeah.
And started using it to make money to go to a concert, a plan which was her idea. Then she throws her friends under the bus. Then explains to her friends why she did it, and they automatically forgive her. How can I read all of that and not come to the conclusion of Mary Sue? Now, is it as offensive to me as, say, Jesus Kun in Sword Art Online? No, but I know the signs when I see them.
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't be. You know how people were suspecting the stuff like Velma or I Am Not Starfire were self-insert fanfics given a budget.
Yeah.
I get the same sense here.
Yeah, I can see it.
So can I with what I've seen.
And a lot of the
bring up.
marketing for it focused on the Asianness of the main cast, which you know how I
Not
feel
a
about
good
doing that kind of
idea.
thing. Because that's nice and all, but Mulan had already been out for decades by that point. So trying to use that as your excuse, no.
No.
And as a bit of an aside, one of the big reasons that I will always object to anyone doing the whole hey look at how ethnic our character is as far as how they present a work is there is no universality to that.
No, there isn't. That's just pointing out a character trait that doesn't really need to be pointed out.
Well, a while back I had done a few interviews with Baron Bell. That's his name, and I've told him that sounds like a supervillain name, especially since he's a doctor. I have he is well aware I'm not the first person to make the joke, but he was and still is writing a comic called Dominion: Fall of the House of Saul, which is a sci-fi reinterpretation of the first book of Saul in the Bible. And knowing this, I pivoted my questions to the point where the religious aspect was the aspect I focused on the least. Because I wanted to present that you don't have to be a Christian to enjoy the book. Because I focused on themes that would be more universal, that were within the book. Yes, there is still the fact that it's cribbing its notes from the Bible, but if your story and your characters can hold themselves on their own, that isn't an issue. And those were the themes that I was focusing on. To use another example, the reason why, even though I think it's horribly overrated, I can at least see some merit in Black Panther, is the theme of legacy throughout it. It doesn't quite hit the mark, but at least it's trying for some kind of theme. Contrast that with, say, Wakanda Forever, and what theme is present there, aside from everybody being an idiot. And I wish nothing but the worst curses on whoever decided to make Namor the Submariner into Namor. I mean, Namor in the comics was a bit of an asshole, but that's no reason to make them completely separate characters like that. But of course, the big problem with something like Turning Red is, as Literature Devil pointed out, a degree of narcissism, and the flaw being that they were too perfect, which is Mary Sue as fuck. But also also the celebration of one's inadequacies. I've seen plenty of times where bad writers or bad artists or bad game designers, so on, will try and justify the flaws that they have in their work with them having a style.
That's not a good justification.
No, it isn't. Again, it'd be tempting to say that that's just someone not taking criticism, but it's actually worse than that. It's someone celebrating that they suck. And that's a bit of a problem. And as far as Lightyear goes, there's not a whole lot to say, except for the fact that, for one, if you wanted to do something serious, you picked the wrong character to do it with.
You really did.
And two,
Yeah.
Especially with some of the shit that Buzz gets into, like in the third movie where he's turned Spanish.
The idea that they tried to go with this was the story that inspired Andy to be a fan of the character. I don't think anybody's getting inspired by something trying so hard to take itself seriously as a space opera. And that's clearly what it was trying to go for with the way it's lit, shot, and scored. And think about just the trailer alone and how many times you had these shots of him in his cockpit, seeing the wonder of space. That's something straight out of a 2001 style space opera.
Mm-hmm.
The other reason that doesn't work is the cartoon Buzz Lightyear's Star Command exists.
Yeah.
Which
Which
I could see
I find
Andy
weird.
watching that and becoming a fan.
Yeah, I can see him. Yeah, I can see that. Hell, there's another instance of that being a possibility. The Backdoor Pilot movie starts with an in-universe scene of the toys putting the VHS into the VCR.
Mm-hmm. And mostly because of that little habit that they had of putting in these mini shorts before the actual film.
Yeah, which they still do at times.
And we're not covering any of the shorts because there's not a whole lot to dissect.
No, there really isn't.
Although I will admit one of my favorites was the one with I forget his name, but he was using a bunch of running gags in Wall-E, and SF Debris calls him Monk because he wants everything clean. So they did a short where he got stuck outside. But because of the fact that he's always insisting on going on the line, he couldn't get back in. You know, but of course, I do know that back in February there was a announcement that a fifth Toy Story was in development, which sounds like a terrible idea.
It does, honestly.
Cash grab.
Yeah.
Yeah, this very much comes off as cash grabby.
I feel like they're trying
to.
I feel like the reason for this is Disney is trying. You remember when there was that huge deal about them buying 20th Century Fox?
Oh,
in the
about them merging with 20th Century Fox properties into them. Yeah.
In the years since, that's kind of become a poison pill, because they spent that amount of money and they haven't gotten a return on those investments.
Ooh.
And let's consider the fact that in the last few years, their track record when it comes to films has not exactly been doing so hot. Not in terms of quality, but in terms of people actually paying to see it, especially in the last 6 months. As you have all of the failures that went on with Phase 4 and now Phase 5 with Quantumania. You have all the shitstorm that's been going on when it comes to the parks, especially the shitstorm that when they decided to jump into the politics and lost a property that they've had since the 70s in the process.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to get into whose side I'm on the fact. It's more of you got into politics. You decided to play the politics and you played it poorly. I'm specifically referring to the whole Reedy Creek situation.
Yeah.
Which I was always kind of iffy on the concept in and of itself, but it is what it is now. And I think Disney is trying to find something that will get them more in the green and stop this long trek of bad press that they've been having. And of course, the less said about what's been happening with Star Wars, the better. And even Mandalorian isn't saving them, because I get the ratings on that. Season 3 has not been doing hot. But shifting back into Pixar, you've kind of touched on it a handful of times throughout this, Shades, but I do think you have a point in that Disney's own animation studio was starting to steal their thunder. And the problem was you essentially had Disney competing with itself. If I were to liken it to anything, as far as an analogy, let's consider Kamen Rider Ghost having to be in the back seat because all of the real money was going to Amazons.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't like Ghost. I've made that clear, but that's beside the point here. The point is, Amazon's was the one that was getting the bigger budget and was the one that was in more of the conversation, whereas Ghost was kind of an afterthought.
Yeah.
It didn't exactly help that so much of it looked, well, a lot of the sets looked very confined.
Yeah.
I think that's also the reason they were doing so much outdoor shooting.
Probably.
Which makes me wonder if shooting on location is cheaper in parts of Japan. Because I've always been under the impression that shooting on location is expensive.
Mm.
It could be that they just have a handful of spots that they have earmarked for shooting various stuff. But I would say one of the other issues is in the early years we've talked about having a very strong universalist motif. One of the big ones is parent-child relationships. I guess the best way for me to put how things have gone on is shifting between between family movies to kids movies, or in some cases, kids movies that feel like kids movies that feel like they're for adults.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not like Walt Disney Animation Studios has been doing gangbusters in the last year, because, well, Strange World got forgotten just as soon as it came out.
Oh yeah.
Like I think
Strange what?
Exactly.
Also, didn't you do that joke already?
Good joke.
He did.
I'm getting the strangest case of Dijon mustard right now.
Dijon.
Pardon me, Neff, but might you have any Grey Poupon?
But of course.
But I think you can see what I mean when I say that they shifted from family films to kids films. It's a little bit tricky. It's a little bit tricky to put into words.
Yeah, it makes sense. The previous ones were, well, they were family films in that they could appeal to all ages. The new ones appeal to a certain maturity level.
Mm-hmm.
Or lack of maturity level would be a better way to put it.
Pretty much.
You remember how a few weeks ago we did the thing about the childishness of adult animation?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that comes into play here, and I will admit with a lot of it, I'm picking on Turning Red in particular because that's the most egregious example of all of these problems. Where I don't. I think it did all right. Although I do know Lightyear lost money.
Yeah.
Now part of it had to do with the fact that it released in a really bad time because it was out in the same span of time as Jurassic World Dominion and Top Gun Maverick.
Ooh.
Now,
Yeah, it might have been able to do decent against Jurassic World Dominion, but considering the hype and the build-up for Top Gun Maverick, it had no fucking chance against that movie.
Oh, not at all.
and I know some people might say, how is that comparative? Those two are live action films, and this is a CG film. It's still a film that has a certain name, and it is still in the. All three of the films that I mentioned could be considered family films in some form or another.
Mm-hmm.
And well, and you know how the thing that's funnier about all of that is I've mentioned the theme of parent-child relationships. Well, that's one of the major themes in Top Gun Maverick. That and moving on. And I bring that kind of thing up because it's a case of beating someone at their own game.
Yeah.
But with a lot of the film, when it comes to stuff like Coco and Moana, I already mentioned the over focus on culture instead of character. Because the big reason that is an issue with me is that unless you're watching a documentary, it is going to be harder to connect with a film that a culture is the core character. People are going to connect with characters, especially when you need to make things simple for a family experience.
Yeah, good point, Neff. That's a very good point.
Yeah. Neff, I'd mentioned this elsewhere, but that D&D movie that Paramount and Wizards of the Coast is banking hard on, even though they shut down the studio. It's going to have to compete with John Wick 4 and the Mario Brothers movie.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, it's dead in the water.
I was never high on it to begin with, but it's got no chance.
It's dead, Jim.
But even if Lightyear had come out in say the dumping ground that is the winter season, or even did a Christmas release, it still wouldn't have done all that well because people are going to have in their head the image of Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story. And then you take that and you try and do it serious, and you don't have Tim Allen. Yeah, that's two things working against you.
Uh-huh.
But the big reason that there is one other avenue when it comes to why I say Pixar is being overshadowed by the people that they used to leave in the dust. There was one particular animated film that came out a few years ago that I think has become a bit of a game changer when it comes to how and out on what you can do with animation. Even if I have my issues with it, and that is Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh, yeah.
Because through that, and then through Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, we're seeing this move towards instead of trying to do CG versions of cartoons, trying to bring the the 2D style exaggeration into CG.
Which surprisingly has done well, considering both instances of that have been box office successes.
Now, granted, in a lot of cases, it's there are many factors to their success, but
Yeah.
the point that I'm getting at is is as time has gone on, it feels like it's felt like Disney's art team has tried to go in this more realistic approach, and animation and realism are two things that will always be oil and water to me.
Yeah.
This is the reason why I harp on over design, on putting too much in the way of details and so on. And when it comes to when I look at what Pixar has been doing versus its competitors, both in the States and abroad. You have first off, you have people who are making decent attempts at doing more realistic characterizations, in terms of their art design, even if some of them were a bit stiff. Looking at you, Ingress. It is.
Lest we forget.
Mm-hmm. But you all. And of course when it comes to CG on the gaming end of things, that's put them in the dust for years.
Yeah.
But the big problem, I'd say, is that as time went on, Pixar seems to have had a resting on their laurels thing. Some of this is due to the fact that one of the guys who basically made Pixar, Lasseter, got ran out of town when Me Too got out of hand, and which has died the death that I predicted it would. Because did I not say it was going to bring in bad actors?
Well, you didn't have to call Amber that bad.
It was already dying on that point due to infighting, but Amber was the last straw, the final nail, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, poor Johnny had to nail that already. You don't have to bring it up again.
Okay, I walked into that.
Yes, you did.
Hold on. We gotta hit this.
Yeah, like a rake. Of course, one man's loss is another man's gain. Since as I pointed out to you, Shades, Lasseter is working at as the head of animation at Skydance, and he brought a lot of Pixar's top talent with him.
Oh.
So we should probably expect to see some big hits from them very soon.
They're working on a project called Spellbound. Now, Spellbound is currently in early production. There isn't even any CG yet, but the reports that I keep getting is that it feels like a late '90s, early 2000s Pixar film. Now he's only the producer. The director is Vicky Jensen, but it is very much giving that vibe because, and that's one of 3 projects that are in pre-production at Skydance. They've only done one project so far that's come out, and that was Luck, which which was mixed. Although it did get nominated for a couple awards for its music. But Skydance is owned by Apple, and Apple seems to be making a strong push towards being entertainment.
Well, with their streaming service.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how well their streaming service is doing since the streaming bubble is starting to burst. Just because of the sheer amount of streaming services out there.
Mm-hmm.
As well
I think a lot of us knew it was coming.
We did because a lot of people were going to be in the mindset of hey this thing is popular, let's jump on the bandwagon. That was going to happen with a lot of the people with the money, and for the people paying, the sole reason that they were going on, say, Netflix was the convenience of having this library of films that they could have access to. But when all that stuff is getting hoisted off into other services, and Netflix is trying to do their own original stuff with very mixed results. And I will make one correction when it comes to people bringing up cuties. Netflix only distributed the movie. That's
Fair point.
They're still culpable, but a lot of people seem to have this idea that they made it.
Now, there is one thing I will say when it comes to the reason why the streaming bubble is also about to burst. A lot of it had to do, as you said, that people were looking at it and going, hey, this is a great option. I don't have to have, HBO, Showtime, all these different channels on cable just to get the movies that I want because they're all in one location on Netflix. And now it's split up again. You got to have all the streaming services to get all the things you want. So it's literally going back to the way cable was, but less convenient.
Less convenient because at least with cable, you have the option of package deals.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
With streaming, I know some people have talked about what about a streaming package deal. The closest we have to that is streaming being papered onto other services, like getting Disney Plus through Verizon, which I'm pretty sure is how a lot of people are subscribed to Disney Plus. Which is kind of like saying Shawn Michaels sold out San Antonio.
Yeah.
When that Royal Rumble was very papered with comps and free tickets and the like.
Uh-huh.
There's different kinds of sellouts. Is the point I would say one of the other reasons for the bubble starting to burst is the original content not meeting a quality standard. Not only not meeting a quality standard, being hyper focused on current year shit, or not allowing for the escapism. Consider for instance what after Henry Cavill left The Witcher, we got The Witcher Blood Origin, which nobody likes. You have everything about the Rings of Power, everything, and how many flops has Disney Plus had in terms of original series over the last 4 years? Most recently, of course, Willow, which I still don't know why. I still don't know why they made that into a series, because it's not like Willow was a massive success back in the day. Lucas considered it a failure, and that's why he didn't follow up on it. Although it was funny as hell to see some of the people involved with it try and twist themselves into pretzels to claim that they weren't canceled.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't canceled, but you're claiming you're on indefinite hiatus, and you've just released all of your cast from their contract. But you're not canceled. Right. And I'm sure you've got a bridge in Brooklyn you'd like to sell me. But the big I'd say the big problem is when it comes to animation in both the East and the West, we are in the middle of a paradigm shift. Now, when it comes to the anime end of things, the paradigm shift is just seeing more CG get better, more refined use in anime.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'd say the paradigm shift really started with the success of Beastars.
Because it showed the potential of that kind of CG being put to use, and if in the right hands, it could do great. But we're still not quite fully there, because a few other studios have tried with mixed results.
X-Arm.
Yeah.
X-Arm!
That was so bad.
The sad thing is, I read the manga for X-Arm recently. It's actually not bad.
Huh.
Like it feels like something that I kept being reminded of Appleseed, Masamune Shiro's earliest work. That's the kind of vibe it goes for, and under that circumstance, it's perfectly serviceable. I know a lot of people use X-Arm to pick on Crunchyroll, but as we mentioned when we did that episode on Crunchyroll, that was not their fault. That was the director's fault, who thought he was the big swinging dick.
Yeah.
And even the director of Beastars had warned him that relying on just mocap alone is a terrible idea.
Bottom line on that one, just because we pick on Crunchyroll for a lot of things doesn't mean we're going to blame them for everything. We point our blame where it belongs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if the Aussies want to take a shit on Crunchyroll, feel perfectly free. That particular expo was a shit show. But on the stateside end of things, putting aside the impact that stuff like the Castlevania animation has had, or the fact that a lot of people have realized you don't have to have 30 FPS all the time for your animation. If you want to go more stylized, you can reduce the frame rate down.
Yeah.
But the fact that more studios are introducing some degree of stylization instead of just relying on it being CG, whereas Pixar is not doing that. I'm not saying that they need to jump on with the times or anything, but we have gotten to the point where just being a CG animated film is not enough of a draw. That kind of thing hasn't been the case for years.
No.
I called Pixar the overshadowed pioneer in this because, regardless of how they were instrumental in pushing the envelope further for both CG animation and animation in general for the wider audience, as time has gone on, they have rested on the laurels of past successes, and not tried to not push the envelope as far as they had in the past. Some of this I do blame on the hostile political climate of Disney as a company, but some of it is their own fault. And I certainly hope that whatever they do in the future doesn't use Bean Mouth, but I'm not exactly high up on Elemental, because maybe I'm being too harsh, but as I mentioned earlier, Elemental, the upcoming project that they have, feels like another instance of what we saw with the likes of Monsters Inc. Turning this mundane concept into its own little world. or the what things aren't doing when you're not looking.
Yeah. Like with Toy Story.
Mm-hmm. That was the earliest instance of this kind of thing, and that was all the way back in the 90s. That's kind of the point I'm getting at is that. Whoa!
Oh,
Sorry, guys.
Somebody let the dogs out. I hate that I hate that that's the first thing that came to mind. But the the point is, I do if Pixar wants to be the the envelope pusher that they were in the past, then they need then understanding that they need to make family films again instead of kids films, or worse, somebody's XP is something that they'd have to acknowledge, and that takes a degree of humility. There's a reason why characters tend to get better after they hear a "reason you suck" speech in a lot of fiction. And if I have to use a double comparison in this, the Sweets arc.
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
The one where Akiko got roasted over an open flame for fucking up and getting the client in danger.
And while she still stumbled a little bit even after the fact, you could start to see her try to take it a little more seriously.
Mm-hmm. Oh. And and when I say reason you suck, it's not a case of just shouting and dressing down somebody, but making somebody realize how badly they screwed up.
Yeah. Sometimes you need to be called out for your failings before you realize, oh shit, I did fuck this up, didn't I?
Yeah. And I'd say a good chunk of writers who are of a certain mindset. Let's go with are far too averse to that, or aren't willing to even be their own critic. Because I've said the phrase a lot that an artist is their own worst critic. And while that can have its dangerous implications, the point of that phrase is that an actual artist will constantly want to try and get better at what they're doing. And I don't quite see that culturally with Pixar. I just see them putting out stuff. So it'll be real funny if animation ends up being another avenue that that Disney gets overshadowed by their competitors. And if it happens, well,
That it will.
If and when it happens, don't say I didn't warn you. So that I think is going to do it for this week's shenanigans. We'll be back here next week. Now, as far as what's coming down the pipeline, I am back on the interview grind. Where I'm at my most comfortable. I will be interviewing the RPG Academy on Action 12 Cinema on Tuesday. Wednesday, I'm going to be on the Emberwind podcast. I'm not sure if they're doing that live or doing that taped. Thursday, I'm going to be talking BattleTech with Iron Liz. Friday, the newest season of Valley of the Judge makes its appearance. Let me see how many seasons we've. This will be our 8th season. Covering the sci-fi RPG known as Faith, which Fun story about Faith Shades. That was when I was considering for a Monk Mini back in the day.
Damn.
Oh.
I didn't because I didn't like how Roll20 was handling the use of cards at the time, and this does not use dice. It uses playing cards.
Ah.
Maybe if I had used Tabletop Simulator, but not everybody had that at the time.
Yeah, it's a bit pricey to try to get that for everybody.
Mm-hmm. I remember there was a point where there was like a 4-pack of codes for that for like $60, but I don't know if they're still doing that. On Saturday, I will have one of the folks from Seeds of Wars on to talk about the New Horizon expansion to that particular project. And Sunday, Lot Even Star will be coming back to talk about his MOBA-inspired project Legends Never Die. And I'm going to be putting his understanding of MOBAs to the test with that. And when I told him about that, he said I'd expect nothing less. So if you want a taste of his previous work, go look up Aether and Steamworks. That's it. That's his baby. And of course, later on after that will be the return of GeekWatch. So that's what we got planned for, and as Yoshi P would say, please look forward to it. So until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk, and join the watch.